Since last week, the internet has been on fire. But before you pick a side, you need to understand what's really happening to us psychologically. I'm Dr. Sharma, physician, board-certified psychiatrist, and Air Force veteran. This is a tough but very important topic, political violence and the recent murder of Charlie Kirk. I debated whether or not to do a video on this, but multiple veterans I spoke to had this on their minds, as did I, and I decided that it's crucial to dig into. As veterans, we want what's best for the country and its citizens. We worry about this country because we fought for it, and inherently we want it to succeed. And the veterans I've spoken to recently have been really concerned, as am I, about where our country is headed. Now, this episode isn't really about Charlie Kirk. It's not about a positive or negative portrayal of him as a person. Rather, it's about people's emotions, reactions to the event, and how this changes things psychologically when it comes to how we interact with each other as Americans. If you've been feeling confused or worried after the event, this video might help. I'm also going to challenge you to think outside of the box and even outside of yourself. And we're going to learn that sometimes we can't trust our own internal narrative about the world, and we certainly can't trust the narrative in social media. I purposely delayed doing this video by a week after the assassination because I wanted to see how the reactions would play out and who they would catch as the shooter. One quick thing right off the bat, I'm not going to be showing any type of graphic content from the assassination itself. I think that on the day it happened, we were all exposed to an incredible amount of detail when it came to the event itself. For me, it actually showed up on my feed without me even intending to watch it. At other times, usually this type of footage is blurred or censored, but it wasn't this time. I want you to remember that because that is also crucial for the discussion. You've probably noticed that since this event, the internet has been on fire. The political polarization and division is intensifying strongly. You guys know that I don't get into supporting one side or the other on this channel. I don't pledge complete allegiance to either wing of this bird, to either party or any particular person, but I do look at individual policies and how they affect us, especially psychologically. And I'm worried because this feels like a situation where we're actually being driven towards something we shouldn't be. The right and left hate each other, literally. Honest, calm political discourse is no longer a reality. There's also a sense that we don't know what is truth and what is fiction. We can't seem to trust anything we see online. All of this feeds into people's fears. And fear leads to anger as a defense mechanism. The event itself is important, and again, I'm not going to show any footage, but Mr. Kirk was shot in the neck from 200 yards away from a rooftop using a bolt-action rifle. He was shot, to my knowledge, while answering a question about firearms-related gang violence. It seemed to be synchronized to a very significant degree. This was not a crazed individual who was disorganized and haphazardly came out of the crowd and shot Mr. Kirk at close range. This was done with horrifying precision. Now, I want you to think about the day itself. This footage came out everywhere. A lot of us were exposed to it in a very raw and graphic way. It wasn't censored or blurred. This elicited very strong emotions. We were horrified, shocked, angry, and different people reacted in different ways. Some people took to social media to express their sorrow, their fear about the future, their thoughts for him, all those types of emotions. Some were angered against the other political party who they thought murdered him. Other people celebrated what happened and cheered it on. Let me be clear, in no world or reality should anyone be cheering something like this on. No matter how much you might disagree with someone, you shouldn't be willing to murder them for it or to see them be killed because of that. That person who disagrees with you and is debating other people in public forums like Mr. Kirk openly, that person is not coming to your house and physically attacking you. So this is not self-defense in any remote way. It's not justified. But let's take a pause here. Remember how I said that the footage being released in such a graphic way is important? Well, that was the first event, right? And this is what sparked outrage online. Then you had these posts online celebrating Mr. Kirk's death. Here's an article about some of these people and what's happened to them since. A teacher was placed on administrative leave for comments she made on social media. In Ohio, a fire department was investigating a viral post made by one of their members. A stadium cut ties with a barbecue restaurant after what the owner said online. And there are a lot more examples. I could go on. And yes, I realize that there were a lot of fake posts by bots on both sides as well. This seems to be the norm after any significant event in the United States these days. Bots operated by different organizations and even countries, but that's a topic for a different video when it comes to AI and bots and non-human entities. For now, we're just going to deal with humans. Collectively, this reaction from people celebrating created an outrage on the right, a lot of people in the center, and actually a lot of people on the left, in fact. Unfortunately, these posts then led to other rhetoric on the other side, which escalated very quickly. Here's an article showing some of the responses from the right, tweets from someone who was pardoned after January 6th, posts about the entire Democrat Party needing to hang, calling this event the Reichstag fire, and that it's time to end democracy. Another post saying we are on the brink of civil war and that we are past words. Even before a suspect was found, the president blamed the left, said that we have to beat the hell out of them. At the same time, he said Kirk was an advocate of nonviolence, and that's the way he'd like to see people respond. But remember, we live in an environment where, unfortunately, short text and sound bites spread very easily. Nancy Mace said that Democrats own what happened today. Even more inflammatory rhetoric. Steve Bannon was similarly fiery in his remarks as well. A member of the Oath Keepers militia was urging Trump to declare martial law. The list goes on. And when you're in the online world, it's a lot easier to post inflammatory things. There's a degree of separation from other people. You could have someone post that people from the other party need to be obliterated or something. But in reality, if someone in their neighborhood who had a sign on their lawn from the other party, maybe they came to their door in a medical emergency, that person would likely help them out. It's different when you're in person and they're right in front of you and they're a neighbor. And honestly, the people on the left and right are in fact both Americans, and they actually share a lot more in common with each other than they think, especially a lot more in common with each other than, for instance, mega donors who are making big policy decisions. My point is, though, that this event and the response has radicalized and pushed people even farther into political extremes. You guys may or may not have noticed this, but in recent months, the left and right had been finding some type of common ground. Not a lot, all right? I'm not saying that they were sitting around a campfire singing Kumbaya, but there were some common viewpoints. This included two topics that I'm aware of. Maybe you guys know more, but first, the Epstein files. There were people on the left, the right, the center, everywhere who wanted progress on that. And second, people questioning what is happening with Israel and Palestine. Regardless of how you feel about any of those issues, by the way, the point is not what you think personally about them, but that there was some common ground being found between folks and between these parties. But now, any remote semblance of common ground is lost. It's burned to the ground, the ashes are scattered in the wind, and the disparities in messaging online is incredible. You actually have people living in two alternate realities, and this isn't hyperbole or me being dramatic. I've seen posts online, including in my own social media feed on Facebook, where I know actual people, friends and acquaintances from throughout my life, with completely different ideas of who Charlie Kirk is. I've seen people on the left paint him as a completely divisive, hate-filled, anger-filled individual, no compromise, someone who was a white supremacist, hated people of other races, and so on. I've seen people on the right paint him as someone who was God-fearing, family-loving, compassionate, benevolent, open-minded, and so on. I saw a photo posted of him where he was in the same lineup as Martin Luther King Jr., John F. Kennedy, and Jesus. And each of those viewpoints, they come along with examples of posts from Mr. Kirk, things he's posted on Twitter, videos he's done on social media, interviews with other people, or snippets of debates he's done on college campuses. Again, this is regardless of how you feel about him. Please understand my point. Don't react in anger. Don't fall back to your existing viewpoint. Step outside of yourself for just a moment. I'm talking about people's reactions. There are two different realities people are living in. And I don't mean that in an insulting way. It's not that people are imagining things or are crazy. There are just two vastly different narratives online. Similarly, there are two different realities when it comes to the shooter, Tyler Robinson, the 22-year-old guy from Utah. There are posts I've seen on the right who've painted him as a hardcore leftist, that he disagreed with his family who is predominantly Republican, lived with his transgender partner, wrote Antifa slogans on the bullet casings, and so on. I've seen posts on the left where he's painted as someone who came from a hardcore Republican family, agreed with them, spent time on Discord and Reddit groups associated with an ultra-right-wing group called the Groypers that hated Kirk because they thought he wasn't right-wing enough, and that the messages he wrote on the bullet casings are actually memes that are posted in those ultra-right-wing forums. Again, there are two completely different realities with both the victim and the assassin. It's almost like our timelines branched, but we can see them both right in front of us. And look, I'm not saying that this event was the start, okay? This was a catalyst for the explosion of division we've seen in the country. This has been going on for years. In particular, statistically, going back to 2015, the political rhetoric between the left and right has really been skyrocketing. I remember in high school and college, I used to be able to discuss politics with people and we wouldn't hate each other, right? We still hung out, did things together. This wasn't an issue. You could disagree about politics or policies, but you could still be friends. And this was even after 9/11 when we would have intense discussions about the wars, things like the Patriot Act and other things. But it didn't get to this point. The evidence of the political rhetoric heating up since 2015 is strong. I'm going to show some comments here on the screen from both sides of the aisle. And when I mean both sides, I really mean that. Now, if you support any of these people I'm showing you, don't get angry at me. I'm showing you what was said. If you do get angry, you might want to consider the idea of cognitive dissonance. The idea that when you're shown evidence contrary to your beliefs or challenging your beliefs, you experience discomfort. We all have to be aware of this in our minds. I experience it as well. I also want you to step outside of yourself for a moment, what I was talking about before. I used to do this when I was working as an intern in the hospital. I'd be working long hours in the ICU or somewhere similar. I'd be very anxious. I'd be worried about my patients. And I would step outside of myself and look at myself from a third-person perspective. I would look at my reactions, see why I'm anxious, and really examine myself. This helped a lot. And look, you don't need a bunch of scientific studies to show this, but in case you want the receipts, studies have shown that when you use dehumanizing rhetoric, like everything I've shown you in this video, there's a much higher willingness to do or at least condone political violence. Think about it. By early 2021, 20% of Republicans and 13% of Democrats agreed that political violence was justified these days. That was more than double the numbers from 2017. This type of intense political rhetoric also promotes something called the need for chaos personality trait. So we as citizens, when we're confronted by what the media or social media tells us are threats to our existence, we feel fear, anger, and a need to upend the social order. We demonize our opponents. We want to see physical consequences for what they say. And you can see this cycle and what's happening with our emotions since Mr. Kirk's assassination. It's exactly what led us here. It's a cycle that repeats. But unfortunately, not only does it repeat, but it has a snowball effect because it becomes more intense as the cycles go on. Next, I'm going to show you acts of political violence on both sides. These are acts exactly like or very similar to what happened with Charlie Kirk. We're talking about a shooting at a baseball game where a Republican politician was critically injured, Minnesota State Representative and her husband who were murdered, pipe bombs being mailed to Democrats, a plot to kidnap the governor of Michigan, assassination attempts against Trump, shooting of a mayoral candidate in Louisville, arson at a governor's house, and more. It's a dangerous feedback loop that keeps raising the temperature and dividing people. This country cannot exist in this way. We can't have two different realities for each party. We have to reverse these patterns before it's too late. These divisions also take our collective attention away from the real issues affecting us as citizens and as veterans. I recently did a short video on the health insurance prices that are going to be skyrocketing in January. Not exaggerating. This is a huge issue, and millions of Americans are going to be completely priced out of health insurance. We have the gap between the rich and poor widening. Many corporations are starting to do what's called precision pricing, which means one person will have to pay a certain price for a good while another person will pay a different price, depending on what the algorithm says they're willing to pay. We have crumbling infrastructure, a broken healthcare system, veteran homelessness, and these are just a few of the glaring issues we're facing as a country. We have so many problems we need to be focusing on, and that we could actually have honest conversations about and tackle together by finding a middle ground. But instead, we're fighting each other. Remember, it's not left versus right. It's never truly been that. In reality, it's good versus evil. And you might be asking, so Doc, who's doing this to us, right? And I honestly don't know. I've talked about psychological operations on the channel before. I'll link that video at the end of this one. But in that video, I presented an interview from an ex-KGB officer who had defected to the United States. And he explains how you demoralize and divide a populace.
Psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country.
And it's fairly parallel to what's happened in this country. And I honestly don't know if it's being done by an entity, organization, or foreign country. I don't know if it's a coordinated effort or happening by itself at this point, but I don't care. Well, I do care, but we're always trying to find someone to blame. We always need a boogeyman to direct our anger towards, or we're always looking for someone to come and save us. Let me tell you, nobody is coming to save us. No candidate is going to come in and run for president who isn't bought and paid for by lobbyists, unless someone goes and resurrects General Smedley Butler and has him run for president, which would be awesome, but that's a long shot. So what we have to do as Americans is save ourselves. That means me, you, the people around us. We have to find the common ground ourselves and reverse this tide of hatred. I was really glad to hear these specific comments by Spencer Cox, the governor of Utah, Republican, where the shooting of Mr. Kirk happened.
Our nation is broken. We've had political assassinations recently in Minnesota. We had an attempted assassination on the governor of Pennsylvania. And we had an attempted assassination on a presidential candidate and former president of the United States, and now current president of the United States. Nothing I say can unite us as a country. Nothing I can say right now can fix what is broken. I don't care what his politics are. I care that he was an American. We desperately need our country. We desperately need leaders in our country. But more than the leaders, we just need every single person in this country to think about where we are and where we want to be. To ask ourselves, is this it? Is this what 250 years has wrought on us? I pray that that's not the case. I pray that those who hated what Charlie Kirk stood for will put down their social media and their pens and pray for his family, and that all of us will try to find a way to stop hating our fellow Americans.
This overall political climate also brings me back to a speech that I'd listened to a very long time ago, but was reminded when I was listening to a podcast the other day. It's a speech made by Robert F. Kennedy after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. And I want you to really listen to the words.
Martin Luther King dedicated his life to love and to justice between fellow human beings. He died in the cause of that effort. In this difficult day, in this difficult time for the United States, it's perhaps well to ask what kind of a nation we are and what direction we want to move in. For those of you who are black, considering the evidence evidently is that there were white people who were responsible, You can be filled with bitterness and with hatred and a desire for revenge. We can move in that direction as a country, in greater polarization, black people amongst blacks and white amongst whites, filled with hatred toward one another. Or we can make an effort, as Martin Luther King did, to understand and to comprehend and replace that violence, that stain of bloodshed that is spread across our land, with an effort to understand, compassion, and love. But we have to make an effort in the United States. We have to make an effort to understand, to get beyond or go beyond these rather difficult times. What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another. Feeling of justice toward those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or whether they be black.
RFK was assassinated just 63 days after that speech. But this speech shows us that we've been here before, at least at some level, and that we can come back. And remember, I just showed you two speeches, one by a Republican and one by a Democrat, decades apart, different parties, but similar messages. And at the risk of sounding like Doc from Back to the Future, we have to go back. Back to a time where we could have calm, rational discussions without hating each other. And yeah, I know, you can call me naive, you might even call me weak for having this belief. And I don't care, because it's true. And what if, just imagine, right? What if this murder of Charlie Kirk was a different kind of inflection point than what it seems to be right now? What if instead of plunging deeper into this mass machine churning out hatred, we turned against the tide of hatred itself? What if this became a point in history where things changed and we were able to become united together as Americans to tackle the real issues facing our country? What if? Let me know your thoughts on this topic in the comments. As always, I want to hear from you guys. What do you think of the political polarization and division in the country? Do you think our emotions are being manipulated? How can we come back from this? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, you might like the episode I did on whether or not we are victims of a massive psychological operation. Click over here to check it out. Also, click over here to subscribe if you haven't already done so. I want to thank you for joining me for this episode, and please like and comment. That stuff really helps the channel. As always, thanks for watching. Dr. Sharma signing off. See you next time.